Good morning, members. Welcome back. All right, so you guys asked for this gorgeous little golden, I think this is Guava quartz. I think so. I got it from Rare Earth Mining, and I've wrapped it in gold fill wires. It's petite. The whole pendant is 2 inches in a finished length and 1 inch across, but the actual cabochon is about 1¼ inch long and just over 1/4 inch wide. Okay, so it's not too big of a cab, it's quite slender, but it's an easy wrap. It's akin to your member's Herkimer. It's a little bit of a weave and then some coils and a little bit of a weave up here. Very clean back side. There's a little bit of stitching that goes on here that is tight and delicate, but you can do it. All right, so that's what we're aiming for today. And I'm going to start with 5 pieces of gold filled round 20 gauge wire at dead soft, and I'm doing 5 pieces because this cab is pretty thick and about 5 or 6 millimeter. And I'm going to get 28 gauge for some weaving, and we're going to weave this bottom center of the frame first. So I'll get about 14 inches of 28 gauge gold fill wire. I've straightened out my wires and I've got them taped so that they're a little easier for me to hold on to. Round wire will jiggle a little bit. And I have the approximate center marked in these wires. Mine are a little off in cuts, but because I had some spare pieces, but for the most part you can use 11 inches on all of them. And I'm going to insert 1 inch of my weaving wire right in there. We're going to make 3 of these peaks, these weaved peaks. Okay, so I'm going to insert 1 inch and I'll hold on to it right there, and I'm just to the left of center, about 3 millimeter. And I'm going to go ahead and make 5 wraps on this bottom wire, and we'll just count them, number them from the bottom up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 being the top one, 1 being this bottom one. So I'll make 5 single coil wraps on this bottom wire. And then I'm going to jump up and I'm going to do a complete 360. It's not quite a 360 because I'm going to come in and insert above wire number 1. So I've pretty much made a 360 around wire number 2. And I'm working to keep the little spacing between my wires consistent. I'll go up and I'll do a complete 360 around the 3rd wire as I'm climbing up this stack. And then I'll go up and I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 4. Then I'll go up and I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 5, and that leaves me at the back of wire number 5. So now I'll travel back down, and since I've just done the complete 360 around 5, I'll come from behind and do a complete 360 around wire number 4, and it drops me below and to the back. Then I'll come forward and do a complete 360 around wire number 3, and that drops me to the back and below wire number 2. So I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 2, and then to finish it I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 1. Okay, then I'll do 5 more singles and I'll make another peak, and then I'll do 5 singles and I'll make another peak. So I'm down here at wire number 1. Do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 singles to make a little part between them. And again, you're working to keep the spacing between these wires consistent. So I'll push those weaves back, and now I'll just repeat this second tower. I'll go up and I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 2, making sure that I keep the spacing and the tension consistent. I'll go up and I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 3. And that leaves me back in the front to proceed up and do a complete 360 around wire number 4. And then I'll go up and I'll do a complete 360 around wire number 5, which leaves me here in the back. And now I'll travel back down. Just going to push these over so that they're consistent. Let me change this camera view so we can get a little bit closer. I think that's easier for you to see. Okay, so now I'm in the back. Actually, I'll go a little bit more. Okay. So I'm in the back, and now I'm coming back down the frame wires. So I'll come forward and do a complete 360 around wire number 4. I'll come down and do a complete 360 around wire number 3. Come down and do a complete 360 around wire number 2. Come down and do a complete 360 around wire number 1. And then that stack is complete. That's 2 of them. I'll do 5 singles and then I'll make my third tower on these wires. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. My hands have a little lotion, so I'm a little bit slippery. Okay, and now I'll go up and I'll do another tower for my third one. 360 all the way around wire number 2, up, 360 all the way around wire number 3, up, and 360 around wire number 4, up, and 360 around wire number 5, which leaves us in the back. To go back down our frame wires, so come forward, do a 360 around wire number 4, then around wire number 3, then around wire number 2, around wire number 1, and then since we started it with 5 singles, we'll end this segment with 5 single wraps on wire number 1. And the reason I'm making 3 towers as opposed to any other number is because my cabochon's not very wide. So 3 takes me around that curve just about right. If your cab is wider, you might have 4, you might have 5, or you might have 3. Okay, just keep in mind. But that's why I have 3. Alright, so my weaves are done. We've just completed those 3 towers right there. And as you can see now, I'm going to bend around the cab with all of these wires, just in a traditional style frame. And I'll come up and grab the stone, and I'm just going to work my wires into nice straight form. I'll push my weaves back against each other so they're nice and neat. And I'm going to go ahead and take these weaving wires out. So just do big circles and a little bit of tension until it breaks on the back. Probably do the same right here to this one. And I'm going to go ahead and tape this side of the wires as well, just to help me make this bend, because it's 5 wires against a small space. So I'm probably going to use a dowel even to help me get that tight bend right there, as opposed to putting pressure on my stone. So I'll tape the other side so that it helps me make the bend by keeping all these wires together. And I'll just tape it about an inch or so away from these weaves to help me get up the side of the stone. I might just scooch this one back a little bit, tear some of it off so I'm even on both sides. So there we go. And like I said, now I want to come around the bottom of this stone with it. It'll be a little bit difficult to just push it up against the stone because it's 5 wires in a narrow space. So I'm actually going to use my round nose pliers. You could use a Bic pen if you don't have a round nose plier of this size. You know, something about the same distance or diameter as your stone, and just keep that center spiral, that center weave in the middle, and we'll push up with both sides. Okay, so I'm going to get my round nose plier, but you can see that you can do it with a Bic pen as well. I'm going to use the widest dowel on these pliers. It's about, I think it's 10 millimeter. And I'll just hold the center weave and I'll just make a nice U shape. Okay, we'll have to adjust it once we get the stone up there, but this is just to start the bend because there's a lot of wire here. Okay, so you just want to start your bend like that. So you have a nice shape there for the bottom, and you want to make sure that one is in the middle. Mine might have to go a little bit more this way. Okay. And that should, if you use a diameter close to your stone, it should get you to the place where you can catch your stone, and then you can make little adjustments with your fingers if you need to squeeze it in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to remove some of this tape so I can work with the back and start bending some of my wires in. I'm going to leave the tape up here to help me hold it all together. So I'll just move this tape up a little bit. It's a lot of tape, but it helps out a lot if you can tolerate using it. So I'll just take a little bit of this and I'll move up the wires a little bit and retape so that I have my working area clear. And this one's got a piece of tape on the other side, so I'm just going to remove this tape. Just take the tape off patiently so you don't wreck your wires. We'll get the stone up here and start to shape it a little bit more. This is very narrow, so I'm just going to bring these wires together. And I'm going to use my fingers and maybe a plier to help me get this just a little bit closer. But once I make these inward bends, it'll help cinch that up a bit too. So I'm just going to put a little bit more tape up here because these wires are pretty stiff. And my hands are full of lotion. Don't do that. Then they get a little squirrely. So I'll just do like that because my hands are a little slippery. And then I'll just work a little bit of inward pressure there because my stone needs to be a little closer. That's pretty good. Gold is pretty soft, so once you get the initial 5 wires bent, you should be able to just gently squeeze, work it a little bit closer if you need to. So let's go ahead and make our bends. We're going to bend the last tab, the last wire in, and then the top wires in. So we'll start with the back. The back is the side opposite the points, so this would be the back. And I'll just come back here and I'll hold all my wires. I'll get a nice flat nose plier that's about 2 millimeter. I'll hold all these wires together and I'm just going to make a right hand turn and create a little inward bend. And then I'll do the same on this side. I'll get right beside those wraps. I'll grip only that last wire. I'll hold all my wires and I'll just make a little turn in. Just look to make them as even as you can. Just like that. So now your stone has a little seat that it can sit on there. Just like that. That looks pretty good. The wires are still not secure, obviously. We just got them taped up here, so work patiently with your stone. Don't let it slip out. So now up here I'm going to also put a couple of little locking bends forward. But now that I have the back, I'm going to make sure all my wires are nice and side by side. I'm just going to start to work this neck inward a little bit. It's very narrow, so all I have to do is just go back and forth a little bit to get that pinch in right there. And I'm leaving just about 2 or 3 millimeter. I'll probably reduce that space in time. Okay, so now we'll turn the wires in the front forward. You can do this with your stone in place, or you can take your stone out. We're going to hold these wires all down up here because they're not tied yet. And I use my finger and just part that wire a little bit and pull it forward from the stack, and I'll do the same to this side, just like that. Then you can get your plier in there, get into that small narrow space, hold your wires back, and just do a sharper turn into the body of the stone, right against the wraps there. You're just making a little bit of space so you can get in there with your plier. Hold these wires back and then do a slight turn inward. Try to make them fairly even. Then you can use your fingers and push them back a little bit. That's pretty good. I think it might be a little off, but I'm okay with that. That's pretty good. Okay. Make sure that all these side wires stay along the side of your cab. And along the side of your cab, the 3 wires, these 2 are in the back, and these 2 we've just pulled up to the front. We'll get a tie up here around all of this now. And then we'll manipulate the wires a little bit more. Okay? So I'm going to take 16 inches of 22 gauge half round wire. Alright, so I've got 16 inches of 22 gauge half round wire, and I just took my finger, straightened the whole wire out, making sure that the flat side is facing down. And I'm going to go ahead and bend down the top 2 inches into a short little hook. And I'll go ahead and hook over the entire stack of wires to my pendant. And I'll just take this short side and I'll do 3 or 4 little wraps around the neck to hold all the wires together. My wires are side by side, the best that I can get them. Once I have a few wraps, I might use my pliers to help me tighten this up because there's a lot of wires here. Might be a bit much for my hands. So just like that, and I'll go ahead and just make one more wrap. We're going to cover this up, so I'm not too concerned with this first few wraps, but you'll make them neat so that they're going to lay nice and tidy. And I'll just cut the end of that off. And I'm going to leave the long side on so that I can do my bale with it, but I'll just cut the short fragment off, leave the end facing the back. And then I've got my half round wire up here. Just going to settle these wires the best that I can, keep them all side by side. And I'll remove this tape now. For me, there's 3 layers of tape here, so just work patiently, peel them all off your wires. Be careful not to bend your wires up too much. If you're using the blue painter's tape, it should just tear pretty easily and come off pretty easily. Ooh. There we go. All right. So pretty much we've got the stone captured, and now we're going to go on and wrap the bale. There's 2 wires that are immediately in the front that come from these 2 that traveled up the stone. So you'll just identify those 2. If you're using round wires like me, they might, want to do a little jiggle, but you just keep them under control. So I've got those 2 wires. These 2 will become my bale. So I'm just going to tap them, side by side and fold them down to the front 90 degree. I'll take the long remnant of my half round. It'll only be uncomfortable for these first couple of wraps in this tight corner, but you'll just go overhand and underhand. Get a few wraps started. Use your plier. Tap it all side by side, just like that. Once you've got a couple of wraps on the bale, go ahead and tap these neck wires, making them tight. And then let's go ahead and make some adjustments before we continue. So first, you'll make sure these wires are all nice and seated. There were 4 wires to either side here. So you'll just identify the 4 and basically split these wires in half here at the neck like this. Okay. If you're working gold fill and you're working the same size stone, it might be a little bit tight. So just hold it at the neck, keep your stone, even and forward, and then just part these wires. I'm trying to avoid running into my camera here also. Just down to a horizontal position like that. I'll probably go off camera and get mine a little bit better because I'm a little bit slanted here. So just part these 2 stack of wires down side by side, and then you've got a little easier access to the 2 wires you're wrapping for a bale. So you'll wrap for about 1.25 inches. And after a few wraps, you'll just want to take your flat nose plier, tap them nice and neat. Keep the 2 frame wires side by side. It might be a little bit hard to see here in my camera. And then keep these wraps pushed back on each other and side by side so that they don't overlap each other. And then just continue your length until you get to 1.25 inches. I've got about 1 inch here, so I'm going to do a few more wraps. Maybe 5 or 6 of them. And then you should have a few inches left on your half round. Probably I gave you 16. You probably could go like 14 inches. You only need a couple inches here left. So I've just wrapped all my bale wire, and I'll just stand them back up to vertical here. And again, if you're using round wire, it gets a little bit squirrely. Just keep tapping them so that they stay facing the way you want them to. They tend to do like this when they're round. If they're square, you just want to focus on keeping them nice and square. And mine is actually looking at my pendant. Make some adjustments there. That's pretty good. Alright, and right here in the middle of your wraps, we're going from the front to the back. You just want to create a nice bend in the middle of your wraps so that you bring the end wrap down to meet the neck, right down here, right below. If you want to use a dowel, you can use a dowel. I'm just using my fingers, just made that bend with my fingers. And I'm bringing these 2 wires straight down the back. My wraps are just below the 2 bundle of wires on either side. And then I have my half round here. So I'm just going to take it all the way around, hold these wires down, and you'll wrap all the way down, 1 wrap below the next, until you reach the base. So we're just going to wrap right over the previous wraps that were there. Just try to make them as neat as you can. 1 right over the other one. Working down. I'm going to go 1 more till I reach the very base of those wraps. And again, we're going to cover it, but just work to be neat. Then I've got a couple inches here. I'm going to lift these 2 center back wires up and just come around them a couple of times to lock and finish this half round up. Pull real tight that last one, make sure you don't leave a last bubble right there. And then I'll go around a couple of times. And then I'll just cut this half round off underneath. Be careful with the half round. You see a sudden bandage on my finger here. It's because I cut my finger while taking this half round off the spool. Cut me like a big old paper cut. So I'll just tap that down, and then you can lay those down. So it should look about like that. Okay. Make sure your bale is nice and centered to your stone. You might have to make some little adjustments. Looks pretty good there. And back here, if you don't want these 2 wires for design, I've got plenty of wires up here. So I'm just going to trim these off and curl them down behind this bale and on the back of the stone. Cut, leaving about 3 millimeter. You can use this little bit of gold for earring wires. There's a couple of inches here. You can use them for clasps, you know, utilities like that, gold jump rings. So just save those. And then you can get a tiny pair of round nose, or you can get your chain link plier and close these off. You need to bend them out so that you can turn them back in. Just a little hook like that. It'll be like a little tiny heart back here. I'll take this other one. I'm going to go way out here so I have some leverage, and then I'm just going to make a real tight turn back to the inside. Just have them come point to point like that. Lay them down on the back of your stone like a little upside down heart. Okay? And then down here, I'm going to go ahead while I'm back here and just curve these wires a little bit to give more surface coverage to the back of my stone. Could have done this, before also, but you can do it now also. Just open those up a little bit. Make sure that my bale is straight on and that I'm centered down here. And if you want, because we have so many wires, we can actually make a second little design. You separate that second wire and basically just echo that first bend. Grip it down here close to the wraps, hold these wires, and make a slight turn. So you've got like 2 of them there. And then just use your fingers and give some nice spacing to these, making sure that they stay along the side of your pendant. And then you can pull the top one back off the stone a little bit and space them out nicely like that. Now it looks really good. So I'll do this side. There's Jolene saying hi. Alright, so while I was off camera, I went ahead and did this side and just pulled a little dent into that second wire. And that all looks pretty good. Now we'll go ahead and we can make some design. And you really can do these wires any way that you want to once you get to here. The stone's captured, the bale is made. I'm going to take the third wire back, raise it up a little bit, and up here I'm going to create a really long loop, making sure that I don't interfere with the passing of a chain. And I'll just bring a little bit of a curve into it here at the neck and swing it out slightly. Just like that. That'll be the most inside one, and we'll make some more elegance and such in a minute. I'm just looking to get these turned down right now. So I'll take the next one right in front of it, and I'll go ahead and I'll make just a slightly shorter decorative loop, still making sure that I don't interfere with the bale. So it's one just lower than the other one. And then I'll take this front one and I'll do the same. I'll raise it up slightly, get a slight forward curve on it. It's in the front, so it's going to be the shortest one. I'm pushing with my thumb just to cause a backward loop in it. So all these 3 wires came down, and then I have my last one if I want to do a little something at the end. We'll see when we get there. I'll take a flat plier and really carefully, so that I don't mar the wire, I'm going to hold all these lengths kind of forward a little bit here with my fingers, and I'm just going to give a very gentle squeeze to each of these loops to narrow them slightly. This little one is probably okay. Just like that. When we do that, it pushes these wires back. So that's why I was saying we want to hold them a little bit. Ooh. So that they remain side by side. And then this little one down here, I'm going to kind of carefully pull this loop back a little bit, align it with the rest of them a little bit. Okay, so all 3 of these wires are coming down nicely side by side here, towards the front of your pendant. Okay? And then I'll do the same with this side. It doesn't have to be exactly the same or symmetrical. You could have one larger, one lower, one more, or one less, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to start in the same way. I'm going to lift the third wire, and I'm going to create my tallest decorative loop on it. Doesn't have to be the same size as the loop on the opposite side. I might even make it a little bit shorter. And I'll get the next one. I'm going to push this inward and more over the center. And I'll just hold it there for now. I'll take the other middle wire, the second one back, raise it a little bit, give it a little bit of a turn with my finger. I'm holding on to the length, and then with my thumb, just pushing back, making a nice loop right there. Use my pliers and just squeeze these down a little bit. As I go, I'm just going to really pull these over to exaggerate more, across the middle a little bit. And then this one, the front one, I'll raise it up slightly. It's in the front, so we have to turn it right away. I like to kind of put my thumb here sometimes to help me. Just get that little turn going on. And push to create a little elegant loop right there. So now we've got these wires all kind of coming down the pendant. I'm going to make a little bit more bend in these. Turn them out slightly. Just work patiently, work with yours. Make it beautiful and elegant. Keep it pushed back to the bale a little bit so that they're not too far out. Make sure that you have room for a chain. We can pull the bale back a little bit and then we won't have a worry. So for example, I can put a slight back bend in the bale and then I'll have room for my chain. I won't have a problem. Okay? And I'll have room for my decorative loops here. You just don't want these too big so that they hold their shape. So I like them, there's about 2 millimeter in between them. And then as far as how flared they are, that's up to you. You can do whatever you like. So here, I'll bend these out a little bit more as well, one at a time. Create some elegance in them going out. Just like that. And then when you feel like you've got these loops looking the way you want them and these wires kind of splayed out the way you want them. Okay, once you get all these 6 wires bent the way you want them to, then we can take 2 feet, I like to work with 2 feet at a time, of 28 gauge weaving wire. And I'm going to weave all 3 of these together and then all 3 of these together. We'll make some more elegance and we'll figure out these 2 back wires after we do this. But you'll just get these 3 wires kind of sloping out in a nice elegant way to the side of the pendant there. And you can just hold them side by side. Just come in here with your wire to the inside. Give yourself an inch or 2 to hang on to. And I'll start weaving right here about at where those wraps are on the neck. So I did a complete 360 around this inside wire. Count that little fragment right there. And then I'll jump up and I'll do a 360 around this middle wire. It's a little bit tricky to hold on to, but you can do it. Just hang on to that fragment so it doesn't move and get some nice tight wraps right next to each other. Then I'll jump up and I'll do a 360 around this outside wire. Okay. Oop. And then I'll travel back down and I'll do a 360 around the middle wire. And then I'll do a 360 around the inside wire. And you can weave these however you'd like. I'm just doing a 1/1 coil, one weave over one frame wire. And I'm going to weave till I get to about here. It's probably 1/4 of an inch. I'll just stay in this same pattern. So I'm doing a 360 around the center wire. I'll go up and do a 360 around the top wire. I'll come back through and do a 360 around the center wire. I'll do a 360 around this inside wire. And I'll just repeat about 3 more times till I get to about right here. 3 or maybe it's 4 more times. And then I want these a little bit lower on the neck. I prefer to have these bare, but you can do whatever you'd like to do. So I'm just going to lower my weaves a little bit by pushing them. And then I'll make 3 or 4 more repeats and get down to about here. Adjust my camera. I think you can see that okay. There you go. So I'm on the center. I've done a few weaves. I'm going to do one more repeat. Oop. And when I get to about 1/4 of an inch with my wraps here and to the place where I love it, I'm going to split off and just do single coils down each one of these. So I'll end up having to add some wire, but I like to just start with this middle one, inside one, and I'll just make single coils until I reach about here, right about almost 80% of the length of the pendant there. So it's maybe 1.5 inches or 1 inch. Let's see here. You just wrap yours according to how long your cabochon is, if you're using a little different size. every now and again, pull your coils back. You can lift that slightly if it makes it easier for you to get to it. I kind of like to just keep it alongside my pendant. I hold it with all the other wires. It gives me a little more leverage when I've got all the wires together versus just that one wire. I'm going to start to curve it up right about here. And you can make that flare out as far as you want. The following wires are going to be behind it and a little bit shorter. So this one, this inside one, should be your longest one. So I like it to come to right about there, about where those bend in. So I'll continue my coils to there and then tie in to that. So once I think I'm close, and you can have that flare out as far or as narrow as you want. Remember that the other two are going to flare out a little bit also, so I don't go too far, but I want it a little bit more. So I'm going to do a few more wraps here. Once I get this close enough, and that's about as far out as I want to spread, that's probably about 3 millimeter, then I'm going to start to work on this wire end here to stitch into the bottom frame wire that's holding the cab. So remember that if it's tight, we use our little needle, our little map pen, and I can slip that carefully between the gemstone and the wire to give myself a little bit of lift. I say I can do this. Sometimes you have to approach it from the top. It's a little easier, and then just slide down. So it gives you a little bit of lift to that wire. And now it'll be easier for you to wrap. I'm going to cut this. Just leave a couple of inches here so it'll be easier for me to wrap through. And then you just want to make, I like to make several wraps. Make them neat and just tie yourself onto that frame wire. I don't like for them to cross each other, so I'll just make probably 4 of them and get a nice secure wrap to this frame. And that's pretty good right there. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut the wire. As low and close as I can, then I'll just give it a little pinch. And that's good. And that's the first one. So then you can do the second one and it'll end just slightly shorter, and the third one will end just slightly shorter. I'll show you an easier way. We did this coil this way because it was already attached, right? But these two we're going to add wire. So a quick way to coil, and I'm just going to use the remaining 10 inches or so I had from this wire, from the one I cut off here. And I'll just do this outside one first. So it's easier if you come out here, try to isolate these wires, and coil from this end the length that you need, and then push it into the upper portion of the pendant where you want it. So I just let this grow a little bit by moving it back. I do a little bit more length. I think I need about 1.25 inches, maybe 1 inch. You got to account for that curve. It takes length. So I'm almost at the end of my wires here, and I'm going to try to use them all the way to their ends so that I don't have to add any wire. If you're cutting a fresh piece, you can cut about 10 inches or so. And then when you have it, you can push it all the way back here, okay, to meet this weave up here. Just make sure your coil's nice. It's all pushed back. And I've got enough length on this one because it's going to be my shortest one. So I'll just leave it there for now, and I'll cut another, I'm going to get 12 inches just to make sure I make it for the center one here. 12 inches of 28 gauge. Okay, I've got a fresh 12 inches of 28 gauge, and now I'll just do a coil on this center one. And that's about 1.25 inches, so I'm going to push it up here. Be real careful that you don't, wreck your wires as you're pushing it up. I'll just get control of this forward. wire. Sometimes I like to hold it with a metal plier right there and then take it with your fingers. Sometimes you have to give it a little bit of space and really make sure it gets down in there. Sometimes you gotta spread the one next to it apart a little bit. And I like to just make sure that the coil gets right up in there. There it is. Okay? And then you can make this curve and see how much more you might need to coil or not. So I want to get a little closer. That's just my preference. And then down here I'm going to turn it slightly shorter. Just make the turn elegant, and that's about right. So it conveniently happens to be there, but you want to make the coil meet there and take a stitch to join those two. A discrete stitch, you know, in between all those coils. So I'm right here. That's a good place. I'm going to come through both of them. I'm going to need to add some wire, I think. And I'm going to snap in to that upper coil. And rather than go across where I can see my stretch wire, the stretch of the wire, I'm going to go underneath it so that it's a little bit hidden. Oop. And now I'll keep coiling. I'm going to make 2 or 3, and I'm going to have to add a little bit of wire because I'm just a little bit short. So if you're watching ahead, maybe instead of 12 inches, give yourself 14, because I still got to make that little bit right here to the back. See? So I'll just turn it up. So right there. Okay. Alright, so I've coiled to about here. I've got 2 or 3 more stitches before I reach that center wire. And before I do, I'm going to just turn this so that I come along the outside of that wire so that I can, when I get there, I can stitch them together with 2 or 3 passes. I can turn this one up also and just cut it off right there and get it out of my way right now. It's a little tight in here. Just work patiently. Don't take too much off. Leave yourself, 3 or 4 millimeter. Make sure that you're cutting only the wire that you're after and not any other wire. Then you can take a round nose. Just make a slight turn. That's all you need. Then you can get this other one right next to it. I'll make a few more coils up the back here to get a little closer to that wire. Just carefully shape your wire so that you have a couple of millimeter spread. You've attached right there. And now we'll just attach right here to this back wire. And again, remember that we have our handy mat pin if we need to make a little bit of space to help us get through there. Just be careful about your stone. Stick my needle in there and just keep it out of the way. It's enough to raise the wire so that I can get this stitching a little easier. And I'll make 3 or 4. Of these wraps to tie this one on. And then I'll get rid of that wire. So just keep your finger on it right there. Make a little curve out. Then you can take your cutters, give a nice little snip right there. And I like to make a nice turn on that. You want to keep it to the back side of your pendant. I could probably make that a little bit shorter even. Just enough so that it lays down nicely along the side of that wire and nothing's poking up, and that looks pretty good. So I'll get rid of some of these extra little wires. I had to add a wire. Hopefully you watched this ahead and gave more length than 12 inches. Okay, so that's clean. I'm going to get rid of this wire. Just make sure that those are nice and snug. That wire's laying down on the back nicely. And then you can either snip this off or you can snap it off, but since it's right there at the end, I'm going to just snip it off cleanly. Give a nice little tap so that end is in there. And that's good. And then now we'll do this one. Get rid of this leading wire here. And I'll just shape this down the side. And I'll just start to curve it a little bit shorter where I think I want it, which is about right there. Since I don't want to redo my coil, I'm going to make sure my coil meets. Probably going to have to add a wire anyway because I went a little bit short there too without giving myself a place to tie. But you're watching this ahead, so you'll give yourself a little more wire than I did. See, sometimes it's not convenient. They don't break the way you want them to. And I'll come back here. See, I'm too short here to tie off, so I will end up adding wire again. A little bit of 28 gauge because I want to flare out to here, so I'm short again on this one. But you want to coil until you get to about here and then do the same thing. Anchor this wire by attaching it right here once you meet it with the coil. So I'm going to redo my last coil here. And so scrap 12 inches, go 14, maybe even 16. Make sure you have enough wire to do these coils. So that's about how you want these sides to look. And then you'll just repeat on this side. You'll start off with 2 feet. We'll weave those together. And then we can split them off into 3 side wings, just like this side. Okay? So I'll be back once I get this one stitched on and we'll start on this side. Okay, so I'm going to tie this last one now off to the center wire. And make 3 or 4 nice tight wraps. And then I can get rid of the rest of this length, or you can use it, but we still have this whole other wire. So for this little cabochon, I'm probably just going to terminate this wire here and use a bit of that length for other things. You can always save, your 2 and 3 inch scraps. Make earring wires or jump rings, things like that. cut this remainder of that off. Take my round nose, just make sure I've got a nice bend that lays down pretty well. You don't have to make it turn over like that, but you can. I just wanted to show you, and then I'm going to get rid of this tie wire. You can leave it there in case you needed to tie this one down. Maybe you're going to do something fancy with that one. So for now, let's leave it there. I'll just get rid of the leading wire up here. Keep it all nice and clean. Okay, and then we'll start working on the other side now. And that looks pretty good. And we'll just basically repeat with this side. I'll get 2 feet of 28 gauge and I'll start stitching these 3 wires together, start weaving them together. And I'm just going to lay them out. They might have adjusted a little bit since I was working the other side. So you can just put your grace and elegance back into them and lay them out side by side so you can weave them. Just get control over them. And that's pretty good there. So I'll get my wire and I'll start weaving right about here. It doesn't have to be at the same height, so I'm going to start a little lower here and I'll weave to here, and then I'll split off into single coils. I've got my fresh piece of 28 gauge. I'll just insert a leading inch here so I can hang on to it, and I'll just do the same weave that I was doing. You can do whatever weave you want. So I'll do a complete 360 around that first wire. I'll come up, do a complete 360 around the second wire, come up, do a complete 360 around the third wire, and then I'll make sure that the starting position's where I want it with this first row. That's about right. And then I'll travel back down. Since I'm at the top and on the back, I'll come down and do a complete 360 around the center wire. It drops me down and below the first one, where I'll do a 360 around that first wire. I'm going to keep my fingernail right here, my thumbnail, so that the weave doesn't travel so much when I'm working and I've got that little beginning fragment underneath my thumb there. And I'll do maybe 3 or 4 repeats to get myself down to where I want. And I'm pushing back each of these coils and pulling them tight as I work. It's a little tight when you get underneath there, but you can do it. I might go 2 more, 1 more up and 1 more down. Oop. Missed it. And I think that's about good for me right there. I like them fairly even though they're not the same length on each side, which is good for me. So I'm going to start splitting them off right here. So actually while I'm out here, I'm just going to start coiling down my outside length with the remaining 28 gauge. And I'll just coil for about an inch, and then I'll let the wire hang out to see what I need to make those bends and the tie on. I was all over the place with my lengths on these extra coils. But just work yours to the appropriate length for yours. And these little coiled wings don't have to be symmetrical. They can be entirely different on both sides if you want. They can start very short, you know, or you can weave two of these together and make an entirely different pattern on this side. It's up to you. So I'm just going to keep them fairly symmetrical with the other side. Not entirely symmetrical, but I'll keep it 3 coils and 3 coils. Alright, so I've coiled down about 1 inch, and I'm just going to leave the remaining 28 gauge attached, and I'll get my 2 coils going on these 2 wires. Remember that probably 14 inches will be your best length to get you down the pendant and then to make the corner and the tie on. So I'll set those up for me, and I'll meet you back here in just a second. I'll leave the ends of my 28 gauge attached once I coil down about 1 inch to see what else I need to do to get me around the corner. Alright, so I'll be right back, and then you work on yours. Alright, so I think that's pretty good for my 3 lengths. I'm going to start with this first one. I'm going to get rid of these beginning fragments just to make it cleaner for us to see. And I'm pushing all of these as close into that position as I can to make sure there's no little gap, and I'm good with that. That looks pretty good there. I'll lay these, make sure they're all kind of laying down nice, and then I'll start curving them out. So here's my first one. And I'm just going to make my little turn here. So I'll do a few more. So I can tie in right here to the center bar at its lowest position. And I'm going to make this one, it's, you know, like I said, it doesn't need to be exactly symmetrical, but I don't like them flared out too much, so overall it'll be like that. It might be a little shorter than the other side because it's a little more on top, and that's fine too. You could very deliberately make it very much shorter and then fan your other ones out even shorter than that. You know what, let's do that. So you know how to keep them symmetrical, you just make them the same length. I'm going to go do something a little different because I have another pendant like this one already where both sides are fairly symmetrical. So I'm going to make this one a little different. And I'll take this up a little bit more, make it a little shorter deliberately. You do yours the way you like it. Just make sure that these, stay nice and flat and flush and sloping with the frame as you add them on, just like this side is here. Nice and together, and that these spaces are the way you want them. So I'm going to tie this one on right here. Now I'll work my middle wire. That's pretty good. Put my pad of my finger right here to help me make this nice curve. So I'll go a little bit shorter. All I'm doing in the back is positioning it where I want it and then turning the fragment up the back. Just making sure that my curve right here that's facing design is nice. That's good for me. So I'll stitch my one stitch here, and then I'll wrap until I reach the frame and then attach to the frame. When you're bending this part down, bend it down so that it faces down when you cut it. I like to take that little pre-bend just to get it going in the downward direction first. And make your little turn. One more wire to go. I'm going to make sure that these are all laying next to each other nicely, that I don't have any weird bends on them. Then here I go with this last one. I love that. And see, it can be a little different, and then we can make, a little more design with these two and make it a little more whimsy even still. So I like that. Oop. Curve it up the back. It's getting a little tight. It's okay. You got plenty of space. It just doesn't feel like it all the time. I'll make sure I have my curve the way I want it. If I can conveniently tie one on here, I will, but I don't concern myself with the shortest one more than these two longer ones. So I'm just going to probably not stitch into the other coils, but I will continue to coil up until I reach about here, right there, and then I'll tie on to the frame. And I left, the wire, the 28 gauge from the one previously on here as well. If I have trouble or I go short or, anything, I have this extra one that I could also catch this wire with. So if you're a little short on the coil and you at least make it to here, you can reinforce the tie-on with this one. It just let me use the fragment that was there a little bit cleaner. So I'll make 2 or 3 stitches here and then I'll trim this away. Just shape them until you love them. Okay. So I'll just get rid of, oh, I already did. Alright, so I'll leave these 2 little fragments back here in case I want to catch anything when I drop these 2 design wires. I'll get rid of all my fragments up here. Just hit that little end right there with pliers. You could tie a couple of bead balls on right there by easily slipping wire, through and behind, and I like to wrap onto these back wires to secure the bead balls, any one of these frame wires or even these little guys here. So now that we have pretty much the pendant done, you want to lay it down and just make sure it lays nicely, press everything down nicely, make sure that you're looking at it symmetrical, from the front. And then you can fiddle these wires a little bit for elegance. I don't like them just too splashed open, so I like to wiggle them around a little bit. You can narrow them down a little bit more if you want to. Remember to keep them kind of poised to the front. See how I'm narrowing, but I'm also kind of suggesting to them that they lean forward. Okay. And then if you like, sometimes with these extra long ones, I kind of like to turn them out, but then just turn the very tip back in just to give it a different look. You can do either that you want. So I'll take this from the back, turn it out a little bit, and then just turn that tip, the back tip in slightly. Causes just a different look a little bit on that wire. Okay, and I like that. And now with these 2, you can do something entirely different, or you can do nothing. If you don't want them, if it's too much for your design, what you can do is lay them straight down the side here. Take a snip, cut them off and leave maybe 4 millimeter there, and then turn that 4 millimeter straight down into this ear and tuck it behind there so it doesn't show, it doesn't do anything, right? But if you want to use it some more for design, then certainly you can always flip them forward, from here, just like we did, and kind of make a bare wire. I'm just showing you options here. Just kind of turn that in a little bit. And you can always try to do this, and then if you don't like it, you can cut them back and tuck them down anyway. So with this one, maybe I'll bring it forward too and see if I want anything over this little weave. Just make a little something. And since they're way down here, I'll just use my plier to help me make a little bit of a flare out. I'm just holding it and helping it turn down. So I have this little shoulder here that flares out a little bit more. And I might do the same to this side here, flare it out a little bit. So you get kind of that effect with it. Squeeze that down and narrow it up a little bit. I think it's too much. So for me and this little tiny stone, I don't need these. I'm just playing around with them to show you some things that you can optionally do. You know, I could just take a bare wire down here, or I could just do one of them. And when you tie them off, you know, again, we've left ourselves these convenient little wires right here, the two last ones, so that if you do take one of these bare wires down and just kind of make it swoop back as another layer, you have a wire that's ready to go to tie it back with. And then you can even take that little end and do a spiral into that negative space right there and have it look from the front. So we'll do that just for fun. I'll use this and I'll take a lap around that wire, which, you know, you need to tie into the frame more than just that once. So I'll pass underneath here and I'll get a couple of nice tidy ties right there. And then with this end, I have a nice open pocket right there. So you see what we just did? We just took this bare wire down and gave ourselves another kind of free flowy wire. You can manipulate and position that wire as you please. And then because we have this nice open pocket and this extra length, I can try to be fancy, trim it back slightly, take my round nose plier on it and give it something of a spiral into that space. So I've got a nice turn started, and now I'll take my pliers from the side, grip my my spiral from the side, and just turn it a little bit more into that space to end it there. And you can stitch, you know, here as you need to land that wire, right? But from the front then, you can give yourself this little bit of a design. Try to show it a little bit more here and open it up. So from the front you just have this little hint of a back curl that's right there, and that's from this bare wire. Okay, and then I'll just finish making a few stitches here to hold that down nice and steady. And actually, because this bare wire has a long droop, I'm going to actually back stitch a little bit rather than just only right there. I'm going to tack it down in a couple of more spaces right here to make it all nice and secure. And I'll just do that with the existing wire that I put on there, or had on there. I have enough length. That I'm just going to come down this bare wire and tie it onto the frame, the coiled wires, to make it a little bit more secure. It's all nice and neat. This is a small cab for this design, but I like it. You just have to work carefully. If your cab's a little bit wider, you probably have more space to work with back here. But nice and tidy stitches. Make sure that it's all laying flat and that it's comfortable. And then when you have the wraps that you need and you feel good, I like to end this wire, make a couple more wraps right here. Nice and tidy, kind of snapped into the coil right there if you can. Or a few single wraps, you know, somewhere where it's secure. And that's pretty good right there. All nice and tacked down. That whole thing lays down flat and nice when I look at it from the side. And it gives me that extra little bit. Woo, that's a lot of extra little bit. So if I want, you know, again, this one I can repeat on this side. It's a little bit much. I'm going to turn it down. Put a little splash out there. I don't think I'm liking that one at all. I don't think I need it at all. So what I was saying by, if you want to just end this wire and you don't want that extra bit of design, you cut it off, leaving just that little bit of a few millimeter. And then you can turn it down nice and discreet. Take the end and just make a nice, neat turn down the side right there. And just make sure to tuck it, you know, lay it down nice and flat so you don't see it in design, or if you do see it in design, then make it look very deliberate. Like, I'll put more of a curve on that so it looks like it was supposed to be a little curl right there. So when I see it from the front, you know, it's a little bit of a curl, but it's not an offensive, you know, straight line that maybe doesn't look like it belongs there. Okay, it's a termination that looks like it's just there. All right, and then you can add bead balls if you want to. I'll take this wire out and end it right there. And then I'll tie a couple of bead balls on there. Make sure that everything looks nice. Lay your pendant down on your board. You can get the center line and the top center. And just press everything down nicely with your fingers. Make sure it lays down nicely. It's beautiful. And now you can add bead balls. You've got this nice bare wire. You can actually, you know, do a nice cascading little line of bead balls there if you want to. Or stitch 2 little bead balls into the middle there, like I did this one. I just added 2 little bead balls to the middle. And you see here I brought the one sloping bare wire over the top, and I stitched it in place because I went over the top in a long route. But this one here I just went over the side. So that's pretty much the difference in these wraps. I might have flared out a little bit more over here. Okay, so do yours as you like, and I can still kind of snuggle them up slightly just with my fingers, not too much because I sewed them there, but very beautiful. And if you're going to add 2 bead balls to the center, you can just use 4 inches or so of 28 gauge. I think these are 2.5 or 3 millimeter gold fill beads. And you can tack it onto there, or what I normally do is I make kind of a pin and I pass these wires through the frame, 1 to each side of the stone, to either side there. Just get it in there. Jiggle it so that that hole isn't facing forward, but I pass them to the back here, and then you can just stitch them on to these little bare wires right here. You know, it's a nice place. So it's a little bit deep in there. Sometimes you got to use your plier and with a real delicate hand turn your bead ball and get it so that the holes are along the sides. And then when you pull it back, try to pull them back evenly so that the hole doesn't face front. Okay? So you can do like that. And even if afterwards you don't like this swooping one, you can still cut it off right there, detach it from here, and lay that single wire down. Okay? So that's how that will look. And you could do a second one up there too if you want to. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed that. For the sake of time, I think I'm just going to tie this one back and then call it done with this one. This back side is very pretty also. It's not too bad for being all those ties. Okay, so I'll make 2 or 3 stitches right there to tie that on, and then that's it, you guys. I'll cut these off. I'll tuck my little cut ends down. For the sake of time, I'm just kind of hurrying that up. And then you can use your pliers and your fingers and make little nudges and adjustments where you see fit to make these wires lay down a little more elegantly. What I just did was pushed this up a little bit further while I pushed the front down a little bit just to get that swoop laying down a little bit more. And then I'll close up that gap a little bit so it lays there, and I like that. And again, if you darted a couple of bead balls, you know, up along here, that'd be pretty too. Okay, you guys, let's put our favorite gold chain on here and enjoy our beauty. So you'll give it a nice polish and a little soap and water with a soft toothbrush scrub, and then enjoy your beautiful creation. Thanks for being here with me. If you enjoyed this project, please give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. Let me know how you did or if you have any questions. And if you made one, please look me up on social media and let me see your beauty. All right, you guys, we'll see you for the next time. Much love. And so the very last thing I want to show you is if you want to do a little line of beads, I took 6 inches of 28 gauge, and rather than just one bead, if you dropped several, there's a nice little channel right here that you could scooch a line of beads into, tie off to the back, just like I showed you with that single one. And these are a little bit big. I would have preferred for them to be maybe 1 and 2 millimeters. These are 2 and 3 millimeters, this big one, but otherwise it's just a line of 2 millimeter. And you'll just cascade them as you like. And then up here, find a nice place to tie in. Obviously to this little ear wire at the top here is a good place. So I'm going to hold all the ball beads steady and secure to the pendant. Make sure there's no slack so they don't jiggle around. And then you'll make 2 or 3 nice tight wraps right here to stitch them in. I wouldn't just leave 2 because in time that can work out. So since you have this length, I would take 2 stitches there, maybe use this lower ear, make them very nice and neat, and make 2 additional stitches right here to make sure that those don't ever let go. And then if you can manage it, you know, that doesn't look too bad right there. You can end the wire back here where it'll never be seen or touched. And then that's a nice line of beads, and it gives a little pizzazz. I'll just trim that wire way back there. Use my plier and tuck that little cut end away. And then you have a look that goes like this. And I love that. So I might just go with that. All right, you guys. Make sure that those bead balls are laying down nice. And then of course this back one, you'll pull it very nice and tight and make sure it doesn't go anywhere. You know, I can take a few stitches right around here to secure it. Cut it off right there, and then that's beautiful. Okay, so now you have two pendants with two different looks. Had these little bead balls been a little smaller, the holes might not be showing, but I can always jiggle them and lay them down until they're beautiful. And that's it, you guys. That's a cute little look. And again, I probably would have preferred a little smaller bead balls, but those don't look too bad. So enjoy your beautiful pendant. There's a lot of options and choices on how to make that top. You know, we could have weaved two of them together, and you know, you can do bead balls in between these little channel rows down here. Lots of things. Okay? So thanks again for being here, and I'll see you for the next one.